Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I'm Shelley.
I'm Kim.
And today we're going to talk about dementia and grief.
And that's one that not a lot of people put together, right? Grief in and of itself is difficult for people to talk about, but there is a specific kind of grief that comes with being the caregiver of a loved one, being in relationship with somebody who has dementia, being a person who, especially in the early stages of being diagnosed, the grief that that person feels too. So we were just going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. I lead the Dementia and Anticipatory Grief support group, and one of the things that I notice is that people are experiencing just grief all the time. That's sort of like the foundation. In different varying degrees, not everybody feels the grief that we associate with death, for instance, where people are really, really struggling, but they're struggling enough. It's a difficult road, and they're not always recognizing, that they're feeling that.
Well, let's talk about the caregivers.
Okay.
And the caregivers that are taking care of their loved ones that have a diagnosis of dementia. And what are some of the things that you understand in the work that you do with these people about the type of grief that they're going through in their experience?
Right, that's a great question. There are particular types of complicated grief that have different names. I won't really get into those right now, but one of the things that people experience is sort of, like you mentioned, anticipatory grief. It's a grief that comes before any sort of loss. There's also one of the big griefs I notice that people have is a role loss. They've lost the role of spouse or partner or loved one, and they're just working as like a nurse, basically, and that's not something that they really wanted to do. And then there's complex feelings. There's sometimes resentment, there's sometimes anger, of course there's sadness, and there's, in addition to the role loss, there's opportunity loss. People are losing the opportunity to do the things that they wanted to do. Maybe they wanted to travel, or maybe they wanted to just have conversation, and as the person progresses in their dementia, conversation opportunity goes down. So, and there's a lot of repetition there can be.
What do you think is a good way that we could support the caregivers in this process that they're with their loved ones, with some of the grief that they're holding and all the changes that they're going through, and how can we, as outside people, better support their journeys?
Yeah, and especially if you're a friend of somebody who has dementia and you're watching the caregiver who might be another friend of yours going through this, respite is huge. Giving them a break.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great way to support it, but also giving them an opportunity to talk about how they're feeling. For the caregiver, that knowing that what you're going through is normal, and the feelings that also that your loved one is going through, that getting that diagnosis, especially early in the diagnosis of dementia, the person who's received that diagnosis is also experiencing a great deal of loss and grief. They're also losing the loss of their sense of self, their sense of opportunity, their sense of what they've been able to do. So there's all kinds of grief going on both sides of the aisle there with caregiver and loved one and family members. So I think it's just having compassion, basically understanding that grief and loss are there, and that it's important to acknowledge that, and being able to help with respite, again, is a very important.
Yeah,
it's the biggest one.
I think what I'm seeing is a tremendous need for a really great support network around the caregiver.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's just somebody to come in and say go to the grocery store and not feel like you have to rush.
Yes.
Right. I'm going to be
huge.
here. I'm going to watch out for your person and keep them engaged and let you, go out into the world and get some of the things that you need to do without having this intense, heavy I need to hurry back kind of feeling.
That's
The
right.
caregivers are in chronic stress mode all of the time.
Right, and they put their health on the sidelines, so they
Right.
don't go to the doctor, they don't do anything social because they're worried about their loved one. And
Yeah.
I've heard that getting a cognitive impairment or a dementia diagnosis is a diagnosis for the caregiver. It becomes all about the caregiver at that point,
Yeah.
because at this point, sadly, there's nothing we can do to cure dementia, but it's something that a caregiver is going to have to live with, and so it's a diagnosis that they actually get in a way. It's not, they're not the ones with cognitive impairment, but it also affects them the most. So
Yeah. And I think that it's also kind of what's happening with the caregivers is they're slowly not taking care of themselves.
Yes.
Because the person that they're caring for and the need is so big that those little self-care things, and they're not sleeping, they're not getting rest, because even when they're sleeping, they're kind of listening to make sure, like, does my person need something?
Right.
And so another way is to just help support the caregivers in their self-care routines that they need. They need to stay healthy so that they can keep doing what they're doing.
Right. And generally speaking, dementia has such a long trajectory that a person is doing this for years and years and years. And it can become so wearing. And the grief changes, throughout, because situations can just feel so confusing. Conditions with the person change, ways you have to approach it. It's stressful to try to get any sort of doctor appointments, in a timely way sometimes. And, people aren't planning on learning about this disease that way, and they're not planning on being such an intense caregiver as well, but yet they're thrust into that role. And so I think finding their way through it, a person being able to have compassion, a place to talk about what they're feeling, really, really huge.
So important.
Yeah. And one of the things we offer here at Hospice is we have counseling, individual grief counseling, and that certainly counts for anticipatory grief, something that a person might be feeling when they're caring for a loved one with dementia.
Yes.
We have support groups, and we also
have an actual anticipatory grief support group for caregivers.
Right. And that's going to be actually morphing into a study around becoming a care partner with someone with dementia. So that's going to be a group where we can go into more depth. That's starting in the summer of 2025. And then we also have a caregiver support group that meets on Zoom. That will stay put, because that is one where we have a lot of people who are caring for those with dementia, and we do talk about grief. We talk about the self-care journey, and lots of things to help support people who are caring for loved ones, not only with dementia but other chronic illnesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to have somebody to connect with that might be going through a similar experience at that time. It's so healing to feel seen in that tremendous work that you're doing. So the support groups are amazing, where the caregivers can all come together and acknowledge each other and be like, wow, this is really hard. And people that aren't going through this experience, they don't understand, but I know. I feel like these people that I'm in this group with, they understand what I'm going through right now.
You don't feel so alone. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Alzheimer's Association has so many support groups available for people, and education, savvy caregiver, other sorts of things. And we work, one of the beauties of our organizations, we work in such collaboration with our community partners. So I love that we have that opportunity. And if you have any care questions or care planning, care navigation, anything within this whole dementia journey and grief journey, give us a call. 544-2266, area code 805, or visit our website, hospiceslo.org. Thanks for your questions, Shelley.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.